Welcome to This Explainer. Look, if you've ever checked your bank balance and felt that sudden sinking knot in your stomach, even when you know you make a decent living, well, you are in the exact right place. Today, we're taking complete control of our money, and we're doing it without all that overwhelming Wall Street jargon. We're going to strip away the noise and look at the actual mechanics of money management. Think of this as your personal blueprint to building wealth, just presented clearly and directly. Let's dive in. But before we get into the math, we actually have to pause for a second and ask a very human question. Why do we buy things we don't actually need? It's a heavy question, right? Because money isn't just numbers on a screen, it carries intense emotional weight. I mean, we all have those moments where we click add to cart on a vegetable spiralizer at 2 in the morning that we'll literally never use. Understanding the psychology behind that single click is the absolute first step to mastering your money. Because if we can't control the emotional side of our spending, well, the best spreadsheets in the world simply aren't going to save us.
So here is our roadmap for today. First, we'll look at the impulse buying guilt spiral. Second, budgeting versus expense tracking. Third, good debt versus bad debt. Fourth, active versus passive investing. And finally, choosing your financial path.
All right, section 1, the impulse buying guilt spiral, or the psychology of spending. Let's break down this behavioral cycle, because it's a trap we all fall into. Step 1 is the urge. You know the feeling. It's that highly targeted ad that knows you just a little too well after a super stressful day, creating this sudden, intense desire for a quick fix. Then comes step 2, the purchase. With modern tech, the friction is absolutely zero. I mean, one double click of a side button with Apple Pay and boom, instant dopamine hit. And it feels incredible in the moment. But inevitably, step 3 arrives, the guilt. The dopamine fades, that cardboard box shows up at your front door, and you're left looking at a shrinking bank balance, feeling a massive wave of regret. Recognizing this exact 3-step loop as it's happening in real time, that is how you finally break the cycle. Moving on to section 2, budgeting versus expense tracking, basically daily money management. Now, there is a massive misconception in personal finance. A lot of people think they're budgeting when really they're just tracking expenses. Here's the difference. Budgeting is proactive. It's looking through the windshield to plan exactly where your money should go before the month even begins. Expense tracking, on the other hand, is reactive. It's looking in the rearview mirror to see where your money went after the fact. Look, both are useful habits for sure, but simply logging that you spent $200 on dining out last week doesn't actually change your financial trajectory, does it? It just records history. To actually fix your finances, we need to look forward. So budgeting is the process of creating a proactive plan to ensure you have enough for your true priorities. It is an active tool. In the finance world, this is often called zero-based budgeting. All that really means is giving every single dollar a job before it ever lands in your checking account. You are the boss, assigning tasks to your money. By actively deciding your priorities ahead of time, you remove all that daily guesswork. And more importantly, you drastically reduce the chances of falling back into that late-night guilt spiral we were just talking about. Which brings us to section 3, good debt versus bad debt, the difference that changes everything. You see, not all debt is created equal, and honestly, treating it all as evil can actually hinder your long-term wealth building. Good debt is strategic leverage used for long-term growth. We're talking about things like a mortgage, maybe student loans for a high-paying career, or a solid business loan. These are calculated investments that genuinely boost your earning power. Bad debt, though, that's financing depreciating liabilities. It's swiping a high-interest credit card for clothes or electronics that lose a massive chunk of their value the literal second you open the box. One builds your net worth, the other actively destroys it. The absolutely crucial concept here is leverage, using borrowed capital to increase the potential return of an investment. Let's make the math real for a second. If you put 20% down on a house, you are using the bank's money to control a massive appreciating asset. If that house goes up in value by just 5%, well, you get the return on the total value of the home, not just the small down payment you chipped in. That is the calculated power of good debt. It's a highly effective tool for growth, and it's utterly different from the bad debt that stems from impulsive consumerism. Let's jump into section 4, active versus passive investing. Which one actually wins long-term? So, how should you approach the stock market? Well, active investing involves frequent trading, analyzing complex charts, and trying to pick individual winning companies to basically beat the market average. It requires constant stress, glowing red and green monitors, and very hands-on management. Passive investing, conversely, is just buying and holding broad market index funds. You aren't trying to beat the market at all, you're just capturing its natural growth over time while, relaxing in a hammock somewhere.
To really grasp the passive side, you need to understand what an index fund is. Simply put, it's a portfolio designed to precisely mimic the composition and performance of a massive financial market index. Take the S&P 500, for example, which holds the 500 largest companies in the United States. Instead of stressing out trying to find the one winning needle in the haystack, an index fund allows you to just buy the entire haystack. It's elegantly simple, it's highly effective, and the best part, it requires absolutely zero Wall Street expertise. And the historical data is wild. It consistently shows that passive tracking generally crushes active management over a 10 to 20-year horizon. Why? Well, two massive reasons. First, the win rate. Statistically, very few highly paid active managers can consistently pick winning stocks year after year. It's just too hard. Second, and this is heavily overlooked, is the fee impact. Active managers charge high percentage fees for their supposed expertise. Passive index funds, they're largely automated and charge absolute pennies by comparison. Over decades of investing, compounding high fees will literally devour hundreds of thousands of dollars of your potential wealth. For the vast majority of us, keeping fees as low as possible and tracking the broad market passively is, without a doubt, the statistically superior strategy.
Finally, Section 5, Choosing Your Financial Path, Building the Wealth Pyramid.
When you step back and look at the big picture, you start to realize that every single financial decision you make is a crossroad. Will you succumb to that guilt spiral, or will you stick to a proactive budget that looks clearly through the windshield? Will you take on bad debt for shiny new liabilities, or will you use good debt as calculated leverage? Will you gamble your retirement on high-fee active trading, or build it steadily with low-cost passive index funds? The path to wealth isn't some secret formula reserved for billionaires on Wall Street. Not at all. It is built entirely on consistent, intentional choices rather than emotional reactions. And guess what? You now have the exact framework to make those informed decisions. The blueprint is now in your hands. We've stripped away the jargon and the mechanics are clear. But remember, knowledge is only potential power until you actively apply it. So, I want you to look at your bank account tomorrow morning with completely fresh eyes and ask yourself this one simple, provocative question. Which path will your money take tomorrow?